Welcome to r/Am I the Jerk, where Karen demands OP pays for the Thanksgiving groceries. Am I the jerk for expecting not to have to pay for Thanksgiving groceries? I, 54 female, have been invited by my friend, 50 female, whom I will call Anne, to come to her house for Thanksgiving. We all live in Italy but spent many years in the US and have several American friends in the area. Anne heard that I make a traditional Thanksgiving dinner at my house every year for my family and a couple of friends, 6 people total. It's quite difficult to get all the supplies here, no buying canned pumpkin or cranberry sauce, so I make every single thing from scratch. Over the years, I've also acquired all the dishes, tools, and spices, and I'm an all-around good cook. So Anne, who was born in China but lived in the US for over 20 years, asked if I would come to her beautiful, and much bigger, home and teach her how to make the whole dinner, for a group of 12 people instead of the usual 6. I was hesitant at first because we live a very modest lifestyle and Anne and her British husband are very well off, but I figured it would still be fun and I would enjoy putting on the feast for new people in a beautiful kitchen. After I agreed, the problems began. First, Anne wanted to have the dinner on a day that isn't Thanksgiving to make it more convenient. I decided it wasn't that important since we live in Italy, so it's scheduled for the Sunday prior to the actual day. Then, when we were planning to meet to go shopping for all the ingredients, she asked if I could do all the shopping and that she would reimburse me for half. I asked what she meant, and she said that I'd be paying for half of everything. So not only would I be doing all the shopping, all the planning, all the cooking, and teaching her as well, but now I'm expected to pay for the food. I told her I could not do this. We really don't have the budget. So now she's trying to alter the menu she agreed to. Turkey and fixings, candied yams, roasted veggies, an appetizer, and pie. It's really a modest dinner by American standards. She then made a comment that her friends don't eat like pigs. She also went to another guest with my recipes and asked her to prepare my pumpkin pie so she didn't have to buy the ingredients. Bear in mind, Anne and her husband are very wealthy. I'd estimate the whole dinner for 12 might cost 200 euros for the ingredients, and my labor is free for Anne. She thinks I'm being stubborn and ungenerous. My family thinks Anne is taking advantage of my kindness and that she's being ridiculous, considering she'd spend double that amount for lunch out on a whim. So, am I the jerk for refusing to contribute to the meal or be bullied into this nonsense? My family wants me to just bow out and tell her I'm not comfortable with her attitude. I'm tempted because this feels toxic and manipulative. Not the jerk. Sounds like she just wants you to pay and make the meal for her and her friends. She's most definitely taking advantage of your kindness and probably just wants you to cook for her. I wouldn't make the meal or pay for it if I were you. My husband is cheating on me with our best friend. I recently found out that my husband, who's 42, is cheating on me with our married best friend, who's 32. She's the godmother to our 4 kids. They don't know that I know, but I caught them kissing at the end of our driveway when he was seeing her off after dinner with our family. We live on a small acreage, and the driveway is far from the main house. She'd forgotten some crockery at the house, and I decided to walk it over because, for some reason, the two of them always took a while to say goodbye. Now I know why. That's when I saw them illuminated by her car's overhead lights, kissing in the front seat. In shock, I didn't know whether to throw the Pyrex dish at the car or just walk away. I decided on the latter, and I was too stunned to cry or be angry. When my husband got back, I had to pretend like everything was normal. I know it's foolish, but I couldn't sleep that night and decided to go through his phone. She was obviously saved under a pseudonym, but I found a handful of their messages dating back 2 or 3 years. Her husband doesn't know. He's currently posted overseas as a diplomat. I'm sick with rage and betrayal. I feel lost, and I have no idea what steps to take next. Collect proof before you blow your lid. It'll give you options. OP. I want to know if her husband has any suspicions without telling him. There are a lot of messages exchanged between them. Pictures have been deleted, but I'm assuming they were inappropriate. My husband tried to bury their conversation in the archives, but I found it. There's enough there for me to screenshot when I have another chance. He conveniently has a work trip on Friday. I'll ask my now ex-best friend if she's available. If she's not, I think I'll know why. But I need hard proof. Update. I don't live in the US. I'm in Australia. Technically, I can't file for divorce immediately because you need to be separated for 1 year and 1 day to file officially. My now ex-best friend recently returned to the country because her father has cancer. She had been posted overseas with her husband. The dinner was to welcome her home. What a welcome. Some people asked about the lights illuminating them. I meant the overhead lights. As for my next steps, part of me just wants to confront my husband and hear his excuses, but I need to get away from him. This level of betrayal physically hurts. I keep thinking of all the times we spent together over the years and how long they fooled our families. My mind is racing with memories, like when she was single and he would rescue her from bad dates, or the times when they were alone in my house when the kids and I were out. How irrationally angry he was when she got a boyfriend and later chose to marry him. Thinking back, they disappeared during her wedding. When I asked him where he was, he said he was reassuring her that she had made the right decision. I feel so sick remembering these things. Update. As of tomorrow, my husband will be out of town. I've been trying hard to act normal around my now ex-best friend, but it's difficult and I feel sick. I've been telling both of them that I've caught a terrible bug and I haven't been feeling well. While my husband is away for the next few days, my sister-in-law, the only other person who knows, will help me pack important documents and store them somewhere my husband can't access. I've arranged for my kids to stay with her and my brother for a week while I sort things out. I've spoken to a family lawyer who advised that the best way to start the separation process is to stop living under the same roof. I'm lucky that most of our assets are in my name, including the land our house is built on, which was gifted by my parents. I'm planning to confront him after his trip, but after that, I want to catch them in the act again. I need solid proof to send to her husband and to help me move on with my life. Final update. 2 nights ago, my husband returned from his trip. While he was gone, I gathered important documents. I had packed all my husband's belongings and left them in the garage. He has been careful about hiding evidence of the affair, but I didn't need anything more to confirm what I already knew. When he came home, I was in the kitchen and he immediately sensed something was wrong. Over the past week, I had been distant, barely answering his texts and screening his calls. I did answer occasionally so the kids could speak to him. He asked why I hadn't been responding and tried to kiss me, but I turned away. Before I knew it, the first thing I said was, "I want a separation." He didn't look surprised. He nodded and asked, "What do you know?" That response was a punch to the gut. I wanted him to deny it or claim it was a one-time mistake. I asked him to tell me everything. He confessed it started 10 years ago with flirtatious messages and a sneaky kiss at the office when they briefly worked together. The affair had been on and off since then. She supposedly always felt guilty, and her way of coping was marrying the next man who proposed. He admitted they had hooked up on her wedding day and every time he was out of town. I couldn't breathe. I was crying and asked, "Did you ever love me?" He hesitated before saying, "Yes, of course, but not the way I loved her." I told him he needed to confess to her husband. There was no point hiding it anymore. I let him know his belongings were in the garage and told him to leave. I said I had spoken to a lawyer and that any future communication would go through my sister-in-law or brother. I told him he could see the kids, but only at their place. He agreed to everything because he knew he was in the wrong. He tried to apologize, but I lost my temper and screamed, "No, you're not sorry. For 10 years, you've deceived everyone we know. Take your stuff and leave. Tell the woman you've been with that I never want to see her face again." It wasn't my finest moment, but it was the culmination of weeks of hurt and anger. I have no intention of speaking to my ex-best friend or soon-to-be ex-husband until I've had time to grieve. 1-year update. It's been a crazy and painful year, but our divorce has finally been finalized and I'm free. And no surprise to anyone, my ex-husband and my ex-best friend are now in a relationship. After her husband found out about the affair, he divorced her. Since then, he and I have met up for coffee occasionally to check in on each other and our mental health. He's been so supportive, often sending me encouraging messages. He now lives overseas, and from his Facebook updates, it seems he started to date again. I'm genuinely happy for him and I wish him all the best. The legal and custody battles were incredibly stressful, but my ex-husband ultimately agreed to all my terms. The only thing he really fought for was custody of the kids. I now have primary custody and he sees them on the weekends. The kids, as well as myself, have been attending therapy separately to work through everything we've endured. During school breaks, the kids have the option to stay with their dad or me. They've been good about alternating time, often spending a week with him before coming back to me. While I maintain necessary communication with my husband, I avoid any personal conversations with him or my ex-best friend. It still hurts so much, but I understand that healing will take time. Despite everything, I've made the choice to let go. I don't want either of them to have that level of power or influence over my life anymore. I decided to sell the property we were living in and move closer to family and friends. As they say, it takes a village, and I've been incredibly grateful for the love and support I've received over the past year. Just writing this makes me tear up, knowing I wouldn't have been able to get through this without the amazing people in my life. For myself, I'm happy overall. I'm still a work in progress, but I feel grateful for the life I have now. The kids and I have been creating new, joyful memories together. When we have the time and resources, we take little trips here and there. I hope these happy experiences replace the lingering trauma of the divorce with something brighter, moments filled with love, laughter, and adventure. The road trips and adventures we've been taking as a family have been healing, giving the kids a chance to bond with their mom and move forward from the past. I'm glad that you're now moving on. Did she ever try to reach out to you after that? That man is a dog. I hope they don't last. Wow, it's like, why didn't he just end things early and settle down with her? Why rob you of a partner who could love you the way you deserve? I'm so sorry this happened to you, but I'm happy to read that you're doing better. Hopefully things get easier with time. I can't imagine co-parenting with someone like that long term. Ugh, you're truly a gem, and I'm sending you a giant internet hug right now. Am I the jerk for not supporting my wife's decision and letting our son go to a party tonight? I, 45 male, share a daughter who's 17 and a son who's 15 with my wife who's 41. My wife's best friend, who's 40, has two daughters who are 18 and 15. Her best friend moved to our town about 6 years ago. My wife and her best friend have been not so subtly hoping that our two 15-year-olds would end up together. I find this weird and borderline creepy. About 2 years ago, my wife's best friend's younger daughter appeared to develop a crush on our son. My son came to me about it and made it clear he had zero interest in her. We discussed how to tactfully but firmly let her down. Over the past couple of years, she has approached him multiple times, and he has consistently reaffirmed his lack of interest. This past summer, my wife's best friend's oldest daughter turned 18, and her parents went all out for her birthday. The celebration lasted the entire weekend, with various events planned. One of the events was a couple's dinner for the birthday girl and her friends. Since the younger daughter didn't have a date, she asked my son to attend with her. He agreed, but made it clear it was as friends, and just for this one occasion. After the dinner, the group watched 10 Things I Hate About You. It was my son's first time seeing this movie, and he mentioned that he thought the Heath Ledger singing scene was cool. This will be important later. Every year, my business partner, who's 44 male, throws a huge Halloween party for our employees, close friends, and family. Costumes are mandatory, and there are prizes for best individual, group, and couples costumes. My wife's best friend and her family are also invited. This year, the Halloween party is tonight, October 26th. Now, here's where things escalate. About a month ago, while at school, my wife's best friend's younger daughter performed a whole song and dance routine in front of our son. At the end of it, she asked him to be her date for the Halloween party. Frustrated, my son made it clear, loud enough for everyone around to hear, that he was not interested in her romantically. Some kids laughed, and she ran off crying. Unfortunately, she's been bullied pretty badly since the incident. My wife's best friend is furious and believes our son owes her daughter an apology. My wife agrees and thinks, at the very least, he should defend her against the bullying. My son, however, feels he's been harassed for 2 years and doesn't believe it's his responsibility to defend her. I agree with him. My wife and I have had several heated arguments about this. Things have become even more tense because another girl, whom my wife's best friend's daughter apparently dislikes, asked my son to be her date for the Halloween party. He accepted, and they've planned a pretty creative couple's costume. My wife is livid and feels he should not attend the party with another girl out of respect. I think that's ridiculous. I plan to drive my son and his friend to the party. My wife has decided not to attend and is accusing me of raising our son to be disrespectful. She believes I'm in the wrong here. The girl's father agrees with me. However, he hasn't said anything to his wife because he doesn't want to create tension at home. He's told his daughter multiple times to leave my son alone. I don't think this disagreement warrants leaving my wife. In a marriage, you don't just walk out over every fight. She's not actively hurting anyone. She had one conversation with him about it, and he stated his position. I defended him, and now the conflict is between her and me. My son is no longer involved. Update. My wife didn't attend the Halloween party, but I took my son and his date. They had a fantastic time, though they only placed fourth in the couple's costume contest. After the party, the tension at home eased a bit. My wife maintained that what I did was wrong, but decided to take a what's done is done approach. Unfortunately, the bullying at school escalated. My wife's best friend's younger daughter confronted the girl who attended the Halloween party with my son, which only intensified the situation. Two factions have now formed among the girls at school, and accusations are flying. My son, however, remains unbothered. He says all his good friends know the truth, and he doesn't care about the drama. Last Friday, the school contacted us to address the situation, labeling my son the source of the issues. During our meeting on Tuesday with administrators and a teacher, they suggested my son should help the situation by defending the younger daughter. He refused and explained the harassment he's endured over the past 2 years. While they pushed back, we ended the meeting with him agreeing to provide a detailed list of incidents. That evening, my son compiled the list and showed it to us. When my wife read it, it was like a light bulb went off. She became emotional, apologized to both of us, and fully sided with our son. She even asked if she could share the list with her best friend. My son agreed. However, my wife's best friend doubled down on her stance, which led my wife to decide to go low contact with her for now. On Wednesday, we submitted the list to the school. Since it's a private institution with a strict code of conduct, there may be consequences for the younger daughter's behavior. That day, I took my son out of school and spent the day with him. He seemed happier for it. One particularly impactful incident occurred during spring break of 2023. Both families vacationed together in Phoenix. One night, while the parents stayed in, the kids were supposed to go out. My son opted to stay back, and the younger daughter stayed as well. She took several pictures of them and posted them to Instagram with the caption, "Date Night." This led to classmates calling my son and teasing him. He demanded she take it down, and she did. My wife had forgotten about this incident, but seeing it on the list helped her understand the pattern of harassment. My son is truly unbothered. He finds the situation ridiculous and annoying, but isn't emotionally impacted by it. We check in regularly to ensure he's okay, and he remains firm on his stance. My wife is writing a letter to our son detailing the harm caused by her actions, immediate steps to mitigate it, and long-term changes to ensure it doesn't happen again. This is part of a family practice my mother introduced, emphasizing that repentance and forgiveness are processes, not events. I kicked my husband out, and he says I'm overreacting. My husband of 6 years works in a field where sales representatives are constantly vying to get him to use their products. One of the ways they do this is by hosting dinners at upscale restaurants, such as expensive steakhouses, and inviting groups to listen to presentations about the product in exchange for a free meal. So far this year, my husband has attended upwards of 40 of these dinners. I find this excessive, especially considering we have a 3-year-old and a 5-month-old at home. I rarely get a reciprocal night out. For context, we've been out together without the kids just 4 times in the past year. I've asked him to cut back on these dinners, but he refuses, saying he hopes to leverage these relationships into brand-sponsored speaking opportunities that could become a secondary source of income. To his credit, this has happened before, and he made some good money before his stint as a speaker ended. However, anytime I complain about the number of dinners he attends, he accuses me of not caring about our financial situation or even trying to sabotage it. It's my understanding that he attends far more of these dinners than most people in his field. Now, on to the dinner in question. Last week, he forwarded me a screenshot of a text from a sales rep who said she would be in town for 2 nights and wanted to have dinner with him during her visit. This is unusual, as most dinners are group affairs with friends and colleagues. On one other occasion, he met with the sales rep one-on-one, but it was an older man. On this occasion, it was an attractive woman around our age, and I looked her up on social media. They agreed to meet on Monday at 6:30 at a nice restaurant in an expensive part of town because, according to my husband, it was close to her hotel. That made sense, though I raised an eyebrow at his phrasing. He got annoyed, but I pointed out that it was a strange thing to say to your wife when you're meeting a woman for dinner at a nice restaurant. He left the house at 6:04. For context, I'm extremely sleep deprived. I'm up with the new baby several times a night, and my husband has refused to participate in night feedings. So by 9 p.m., I was tired and really wanted to go to sleep, but the baby was colicky and crying, and it was keeping my toddler awake. I texted my husband to find out when he thought he'd be home so I could have a sense of how long it would be before I could sleep. In the text, I said it was no big deal. I just wanted a ballpark idea of when he'd be home. He didn't respond. He wears an Apple Watch and is constantly responding to texts on his phone, so it was annoying to me that he couldn't give me an estimate after 3 hours at dinner. I called him at 9:15 and he sent me straight to voicemail. I called again at 9:30 with the same result. At this point, I texted him and said I would be calling the restaurant. When I did, the host told me there was no one in the restaurant, and he could confidently say that no one matching my husband's description had been in the restaurant that night. I texted my husband to let him know I was calling his parents to see if they had heard from him. They hadn't. Finally, at almost 10 p.m., I texted him and told him not to come home. 15 minutes after my last text, he sent me an automated text from his GPS app telling me he'd be home by 10:20 p.m. I texted him again and told him to go to his parents' house. He showed up anyway, and I wouldn't let him in. He didn't have keys. He said I was acting irrationally and that I was creating events in my mind. He explained that the restaurant was more like a sports bar, so they went to a nicer place across the street. He said his phone was in his pocket on silent, except he must have declined the calls in order to send me straight to voicemail. He also said he was trying to generate revenue for our family. He said my self-esteem wasn't his problem and that my behavior had better be a symptom of PMDD. Long story short, I didn't let him in. He slept at his parents' house and came over to the house the next morning to get his stuff. He's there again tonight after going to yet another dinner and will likely be there for the foreseeable future. I think his behavior was shady and disrespectful, but he thinks I've blown the whole thing out of proportion. I'm so tired that I can't make sense of it, and I need to ask, am I justified in my anger, or is he right and I'm making too big a deal out of it? The best case scenario here is that your husband just doesn't care about you or your family. That's the best case scenario. Worst is what's more likely, that he's cheating. I'm a doctor and I've been to these dinners. Your husband is the big fish here, not the rep. They're trying to impress him, not the other way around. There's absolutely no reason he can't step away and take your calls or end it early. And most importantly, no reason he can't say no to dinners in favor of being a father and husband. Also, on what planet does this 35-year-old rep hold the keys to him becoming a lucrative speaker? All of this is BS. Tell him if he's so concerned about financials, he should consider the cost of a divorce, alimony, and child support. Set aside the cheating thing and just look at your post. He's spending many evenings out of the house. You've asked him to cut back and he's refused. He spent 5 hours at this last one while you had a newborn. You're looking up social media for his contacts, recording how long he's out and when exactly he left, and checking up on him. When you do this, you find out he's lied. He's gaslighting and insulting you. Even assuming he's doing what he says he is, you guys have some serious issues with communication and negotiation. I'm not sure what field he's in, but I'm in the medical field, and in my area, we do not have that many people vying for us to give their products. I'd assume he's in a specific specialty if he is medical. If so, he's got to be going to any and every specialty dinner to be having that many. I think he's using dinners to cover up infidelity. I'd step into psycho and be putting a throwaway prepaid phone in his car with Life 360 installed so I can track him. This sub is insane. Immediately jumping to cheating and divorce with little to no details? You immediately accused him of cheating when you raised your eyebrows at his phrasing. You also stalked this person's socials. This is before he even went to the dinner. So yes, to a certain extent, he's correct. You are creating situations in your head. You don't mention if his story makes sense. Is the restaurant actually more like a sports bar? Is there a nicer restaurant across the street? He forwarded you the name, date, location, and time of the dinner. This is not the usual behavior of someone who's cheating. You don't even mention how far the restaurant is. You say he left at 6 and was home at 10:20, so the restaurant is probably 30 minutes away. That means he was at the dinner from 6:30 to 10, which is 3.5 hours. Add in switching the restaurant, and it's a 3-hour dinner. Long, but not excessively long. Based on the above, it's not confirmed he's cheating or even really hinted at. He was at a dinner for 3.5 hours. He told you who it was with and the time. He didn't answer his phone. You locked him out of the house, called him, the restaurant, and his parents. Yeah, seems a bit like you overreacted if that's really all you've got. My girlfriend of 7 months won't allow my parents to move in with us even though I own the house that we live in. My girlfriend, Alice, who's 34, and I, 34 male, have been together for a while now. Although we're not married, we both live in my house. We were discussing marriage options though. The thing is, my parents are getting older and I've recently moved to the USA. I wanted them to remain together with me, and so did they. I offered to bring them over here and they were agreeable to the idea. But I didn't want to leave them alone or to just get a house for them like that, so I asked them to live with me. When Alice heard about this, she was against the idea. She said that I can't just invite someone else to live with us, and I told her that it was not just someone else and that we're talking about my parents. She said that she does not want that and asked me why I'm even doing it. I told her, well, they're my parents and I want to look after them. I'm not asking you to do that either. She protested by saying that I'm valuing my parents more than her and asked me to just get them to an old age home or something. I lost my temper at that and told her to mind her own business and that it's against my values to just abandon my parents once they get old. It resulted in a full-blown argument, and in the end I told her, I get to decide who lives in my house, so don't interfere with my affairs. She's now sour with me and is not talking to me, but I wonder whether I did anything wrong. Am I the jerk? Edit. I told her about it to discuss it with her, in the sense that I let her know beforehand in advance, so that she could prepare for it and to also get her opinion, but she was against it from the very beginning. But as they are my parents, I did not want her approval per se, if that makes it clear. And no, she doesn't pay the rent. She's from the same culture as I am and has taken care of her parents before. Not in the same way I did, but she's done a lot for them herself. Another edit, as some deemed it necessary. We've been together for around 5 to 7 months. You completely dismissed your girlfriend's feelings, and you wonder if you're the jerk? Yeah, you are. It may be your house. That may give you the raw power to authorize your parents to stay, but your partner has wants, desires, and needs and feelings too. And it would be a huge shock to suddenly go from living with a partner to living with them and their parents. You didn't even discuss it. You just decided you had the power to do it, and you did it. Then you basically told her to shut up when she voiced concern. It may very well end up being you living with your parents with no girlfriend in the picture. I'd certainly have serious doubts about committing to a future with someone whose attitude is that if they have the power to do something they want to do, then they're just gonna do it, and I can go buzz off. You're the jerk. Yes, it is technically your house, and your feelings are understandable, but the fact that you're moving two people who will need a certain level of care into the house that you share with your partner, there was no discussion, and apparently there's no room for compromise. I doubt you would have done this to a roommate, much less a serious romantic partner. You can move your parents in, but I'd expect your girlfriend to move out, especially if you come from a culture where the automatic burden of care goes to the female members of the household. Dude, she's gonna dump you and move out. You may not be wrong about deciding who can live in your house, but you're definitely the jerk about it, and you're going to destroy your relationship. You're the jerk. Also, you may have wanted to hear her opinion, but it's clear that whatever her opinion is doesn't matter to you because your mind is made up. Not the jerk. Good thing you hadn't married her yet, or she'd be divorcing you and taking half your stuff. It's your house, my guy. She owns no part of it. There is no reason for you to require her permission at all. All you have to do is tell her, I've decided my parents are moving in with me on this date. Hopefully you'll be cool with that, but if not, I understand and we'll have to go our separate ways. Like, you've been dating her for 6 months. Reddit is crazy for thinking you need to discuss this and get her permission before making your decision. Karen refused to pay me for my work, so I sued her. This happened several years ago. I was working 40 hours a week programming at my main job, but I did occasional small projects in the evenings and on weekends for other clients. At one point, I was referred to a large company that runs major stadiums and event venues around the country. One of their stadiums is relatively close to where I live. I'll just call them Mark 1 for this story. The saga begins. This manager at Mark 1 said they wanted a simple administration database and user interface for employee timekeeping. Apparently, the old system they had was not working for them. I got details of what they wanted and drafted a set of specifications. Told them I could write the system to the specs for $2,000 flat fee. They agreed. I immediately went to work and I churned out a database and UI for the system with full documentation in about 2 weeks. So I scheduled an in-person meeting to show them. Now, when I showed up at the meeting, someone representing the security department was there, and he asked about getting some additional features. Sure, I told him, I can do that. So I went back, wrote up a change request, and incorporated the additional features into the platform. I scheduled another meeting with Mark 1 for a couple of days later. When I got to that meeting, I noticed the audience had grown. There were 2 extra people from the finance department. Can you add feature X, feature Y, and feature Z? They asked. Sure, no problem. So I left, wrote up a CR, and added the features. A few days later, I met with them again. Imagine my surprise when the audience size had grown and the new attendees asked for more features. This went on for about 5 more rounds, and I was getting frustrated that I had spec'd out a 2-week project that was now taking months, and I wouldn't be paid until I delivered, and they accepted the final product. But I chugged along implementing all their change requests. But one day, the Mark 1 manager called me. Apparently, she had been speaking with other departments that weren't represented in her status meetings of ever-increasing mass. She gave me a list of dozens of new features they wanted, some of which would require a complete redesign of the core database and an overhaul of the UI. I had had enough. I told her, this is a complete overhaul of the original spec. I'll have to redesign and rebuild this from the ground up. Well, that's not my problem, she responded. Well, actually it is. I'm not going to design and build an entirely new system until you pay me for the current one, built to the specs that we agreed on. After a short pause, she dropped a bomb on me. Well, we're not going to renegotiate. You can consider this project canceled. That's not how this works. You still have to pay me for the work I've done. No, I don't. You haven't delivered anything. Sue me. And she hung up. Cue the malicious compliance. Meet me at the courthouse. I took Mark 1's manager's advice and went to the courthouse the next day to file a small claims court to recover $2,000 from Mark 1. On my court date a couple of months later, I went down to the courthouse and was greeted by an arbitrator. In my state, they have court-appointed arbitrators meet the litigants when they arrive to see if the parties can sort out the case with an agreement to maximize the judge's time. The arbitrator asked me, "Is there anything you would agree to resolve this immediately?" I thought about it and said, "If they'll pay me 90%, $1,800 right now, I'll drop the suit." He then went into a slide room where the Mark I manager and the corporate lawyer were hanging out. I heard her screaming that they would rather pay it all or pay zero. The arbitrator came to me with the news, and I told him, "I heard, and I'm happy to take it all." He laughed and said no, they want to go to trial. Fast forward a couple of hours, and we're standing in front of a judge. I'm at my table alone, and the Mark I manager and lawyer are standing at the opposite table. The judge asked Mark I manager to tell her side first. She went into a very long speech about the project and corporate America and apple pie and all sorts of stuff. I stopped listening about 28 minutes ago. She talked non-stop for at least 30 minutes. Then the judge asked me for my story. Now, I wasn't maliciously ignoring Mark I manager's long-winded rant. I was actually formulating a strategy. I thought to myself, the judge probably had people who like to speechify in front of him all day, every day. I also thought he might appreciate a short and sweet story that got straight to the point and didn't waste his time. So I said, "Your Honor, they agreed to pay me $2,000 to design and build a software system for them. I completed the work based on the agreed specs, and then they decided to cancel the project after I was done." That was it. Then the judge asked me, "How do I know you did the work?" I had printed out the specs, change requests, documentation, and source code the night before. I lifted a ream of paper, 500 pages, from my table and offered it to the bailiff. "Here's the code I wrote for them, Your Honor." The bailiff came to take it from me, and the judge waved him off. "No need, I can see it from here." The judge then asked Mark I's manager, "Is this true?" She looked like she was in a daze. Yes." Then I fined for the plaintiff in the amount of $2,000. About a month later, Mark I still hadn't paid. So I called the county sheriff and explained, sent him the court judgment documents, and he said, "No problem, they'll pay." The sheriff actually called me later that day. He was on a cell phone, and I could hear him talking to the Mark I manager. He told her, cut a check for $2,000 right now, or he was going to rip your computer out of the wall and auction them off until the judgment is satisfied. I don't know if he had that authority, but the sheriff seemed to have a grudge against Mark I, and he was reveling in the opportunity to dog them out. Apparently, Mark I believed he had the authority because, long story short, the sheriff had a $2,000 check in his hand about 15 minutes later, and it was in my mailbox about a week later. Do this next. Tap here on your screen to come see our new podcast playlist, where you'll find thousands of hours of the best stories you've ever heard. Or tap the one on the right. That episode is specifically just for you, based on other videos you've enjoyed the most.